Hello hockey fans, Oddman Rush here and welcome to a Halloween episode of This Week in Hockey. Ooh, spooky. In all likelihood, I'm probably uploading this video a day or two after Halloween finished, but I hope you guys have still got your costumes on because I do. I've decided to dress as the most terrifying, most awful thing in the entire world this Halloween, the ghost of a relocated NHL franchise. Let's get on with it, shall we? First up, we have a comment from Corpse of the Crucifix, very on brand with the Halloween theme, nice job buddy, I'm impressed, who wants to know my unexpected starts to the season, either teams or individual players. Personally, Philadelphia has surprised me a lot. Yeah, the Flyers have been a really strong team out of the gate, and considering they're going through a rebuild or a retool of pretty much their entire roster, I don't think many people had such a strong start for the Flyers on their 23-24 season bingo card. So yeah, the Flyers have had a really strong start to the year. That's actually a really good pick in terms of teams that might have surprised you to start the year. I think the Montreal Canadiens, who we talked about a lot last episode, they've really surprised me as well. I did watch their game live against the Columbus Blue Jackets at the Bell Center. Really fun game, a good come from behind victory for the Habs. There are a lot of games that they're playing, even if they're losing, they're still picking up that overtime or shootout loss loser point. So the goaltending from the Habs has really carried them early on. The trio of Jake Allen, Sam Montembeault, and Caden Primo. It's not necessarily pretty, but they're getting the job done. But in terms of the team that I think has surprised me the most this year, it's the New York Rangers. Now, you guys obviously know that I'm a big Rangers fan. I follow them pretty religiously every season, but the fact that they've had such a change in their coaching style, new coach Peter Laviolette joining the fold, taking his place behind the bench, considering the previous style they had under Gerard Gallant, I felt like it was going to take a lot more time for the players to get adjusted and feel comfortable within the system, to learn all of the kind of nuances within the new style that they're playing. But the fact that they've recently, thanks to their win against the Winnipeg Jets, they've swept a road streak of 5 games or more for the first time in franchise history. They've never played 5 straight road games on a road trip and won every single one until this season. I think it just goes to show you that they're managing to scratch out wins that they might not have got in previous years because they've got a bit more structure, they've got a bit more of a coaching style that either fits with the players better or they're willing to buy into more. It's a lot more like, we have systems in place for every single type of scenario, you just need to execute those systems and we'll get the job done. Obviously, great goaltending by Igor Shesterkin. Adam Fox has been insane on the power play. Artemi Panarin, he shaves his head, he becomes a beast once again. So the Rangers are firing on all cylinders, they're getting the job done, and as a Rangers fan personally, I cannot be happier with the start that they've had. I believe they're 7-2-0 at the time of this recording, so great job New York, very happy about that. But in terms of a team that surprised me for all of the wrong reasons to start this season, there's several of which you can pick. The Pittsburgh Penguins with their aging core, the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames have both had awful starts to the season, both of whom we're going to talk about in a bit more detail a little later, so stay tuned guys. But if I had to pick one of them, I think it's got to be the obvious choice, the San Jose Sharks, you know? Obviously, they're going through a rebuild like some of the other teams we've mentioned. We knew this year for the Sharks wasn't going to go very well, but oh boy, have they got off to probably the worst start they could have possibly done. I believe they're 0-8-1 in their first 9 games of the season. They have not won a game in regulation, and we're over 10% of the way through the regular season schedule. Obviously, this team's not supposed to be competing for the playoffs. They have a lot of young prospects on the roster who, you know, are trying to find their place on the team or are trying to prove that they should be NHL players. Right now, they're really not doing it, are they? A lot of players on that team really need to take a long, hard look at themselves and the rest of the roster and go, is this the best we've got? Because right now, it's very clearly not good enough. The only team left in the NHL who has not won a single game so far this season, like I said, over 10% of the way through the regular season schedule, that's just not good enough. I know David Quinn has worked with a lot of college players. I know he has experience working with late teen, early 20-year-old guys. He had some relatively okay success with the Rangers before, but yeah, this just isn't good enough. Guys, San Jose, you need to figure this out. Enough's enough, okay? Next up, we have I'm Waldo, who wants to know my thoughts on the Heritage Classic, whether it be the outcome of the game or the jerseys. Now, Waldo thinks the brown shorts were kind of dust, but the pre-game fits were on point. Love the vids as always. Oh, stop it, Waldo, you're gonna make me blush. Now, in terms of the Heritage Classic, I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't actually watch the game. I was away for my birthday weekend in Quebec City, so I didn't get the chance to sit down and watch the game. But in terms of the game itself, it was just kind of 2 terrible teams hoping to win. I mean, one of the teams had to win, right? And the Oilers had a single win on the season, I believe, before they went to the Heritage Classic, won the game against the Flames. I can't remember the final score. Like I said, I I didn't watch it. But the jerseys I thought were quite nice. I think they were unique enough to separate themselves from their actual team jerseys, but they weren't so unique that they looked awful. Like I said earlier, the Oilers and the Flames are two teams that have vastly underperformed to start the season. They're really not doing very well. And the fact that obviously for the Oilers, McDavid was out for a week or two didn't help either. It just didn't seem like the most exciting game. Obviously, there was some chirping between Evander Kane and Nazem Kadri during the game, which obviously made things a bit more exciting from the social media perspective and kind of hearing the stuff that they were chirping, which isn't safe for TV. But yeah, the Heritage Classic, I didn't watch it. I wasn't really enticed enough to watch it. I've never watched a Heritage Classic live before. Maybe now living in Montreal will help me do that in future years. I wasn't really excited because both the teams kind of sucked, and they still do. So, great. Speaking of the Edmonton Oilers, now we have Ryu Ranger who asks what the hell is going on with the Oilers and why are they off to a horrible start. Now, if we take a look at the Edmonton Oilers roster, they aren't really that changed compared to years past, and a lot of the criticisms that the Oilers roster has had in years past is that their defense isn't strong enough and their goaltending isn't clutch when it needs to be. Lo and behold, once again, the 23-24 season begins, their offense is firing on all cylinders, despite the fact that McDavid went down for a week or so, but once again, the defense isn't holding up like it should do, and the goaltending has been pretty abysmal to start the year. So it just seems like another year of the same problems, and the Oilers haven't fixed them once again. Now, are the Oilers a playoff team? Obviously, if they keep going the way that they're going at the moment, probably not. I think they'll even out as the months go on. Once we get to kind of New Year time, I would imagine that they're going to be back in the playoff race. If they didn't make the playoffs, that would be a shock, and they would probably need to consider dismantling the whole thing at that point. They've trusted this core of, McDavid, Draisaitl, Darnell Nurse for several years now, almost half a decade at this point. They're going to need to see some results there, and right now they're not getting those results. Offensively, Draisaitl, McDavid, Zach Hyman, they're all doing their job. Offensively, they're doing a great job, but that's never been the criticism of the Edmonton Oilers. It's always been their lack of defensive depth, and even their star defensemen struggle defensively as well. And the goaltending, when it's required, when the chips are down, when they need their netminder to make a save, the netminder either whiffs it or doesn't make the save at all. So Jay Woodcroft has obviously been pretty solid for the Oilers since he took the reins, but 2 wins in your first 8 or 9 games isn't good enough for a team that's supposed to be considering the conference finals every year at this point. Especially you've got the best player in hockey in Connor McDavid, and you've got potentially the second best player, a 1-2 punch. It's similar with the Penguins with Crosby and Malkin like a decade ago. Those guys had to make the playoffs every single year or they were seen as failures. This is the same case for the Oilers, and even more so because they're in a Canadian market with a team that's had a lot of success, also had the best player who's ever played on their roster decades before. So yeah, the Oilers really need to figure this out. They need to tighten up their defensive play, whether it be acquiring a defenseman or changing the system that they're playing, because clearly the system that they're implementing at the moment isn't working. I don't know who's in charge of the defensive side of the coaching for the Oilers, but whether it's the fact that they're just not up to the job or they aren't implementing the right strategy for the pieces that they have there, they need to figure this out and fast, because if they don't, by the time they reach kind of Christmas time, New Year, they could be well out of the playoff race, to the point where they can consider maybe being in the draft lottery, and for an Oilers team that really needs to find postseason success, that's not good. So Oilers, figure this out. And ultimately, we have Who's Swiss, who asks, what's your hottest take so far in the NHL season? Mine is pretty much straightforward. The Battle of Alberta will be a big, whopping, giant nothing burger of a hype fest for both teams. For my biggest hot take, I need to think of something off the top of my head. I want to go with something so crazy that it's going to shock people, it's going to stun people. But then if or when it happens, we can come back to this video in several months' time and go, Oddman Rush, you're a genius. You're the best hockey analyst out there, even though you're just some guy who sits his butt on YouTube and talks with a funny accent. My hot take is going to be that both the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings are going to both miss the playoffs for yet another season. I've heard so much talk from Red Wings and Senators fans on social media talking about how this year is the year they're going to take the next step. They've both got young, exciting, up-and-coming cores of players that are peppered with solid veterans around them. They're both going to get the job done this year, and anybody who doubts them is wrong. I want to see them put back in their place, ladies and gentlemen. I want to see these guys come rocketing back down to earth and see both of their teams miss the playoffs and both of these fan bases go, maybe we need another year. There's nothing wrong with having belief in your team and thinking, you know what, my team's going to take the next step this season and they're going to get the job done. However, there's a line between confidence and cockiness, and I feel like both of these fan fan bases, the select few maybe, just maybe the loudest minority on social media, have blown this way out of proportion. They think they're winning the Stanley Cup this year and taking away all of the trophies this season. So, you know what, Red Wings, Senators fans, it's time for you to come back down to earth. Your teams are solid, they're looking good, but are they playoff ready? We've still got plenty of the season to find out, but I don't think so. Boom. Let's see how that goes, shall we? Oh, this is going to come back to haunt me, isn't it? And finally, we have Tolsman who asks, should neck guards become mandatory? For those of you who don't know why this question is being asked, there was an absolutely awful, tragic accident that took place in the Elite Ice Hockey League, the UK's league back home late last week, regarding former NHL player Adam Johnson. I'm not going to go into the details of what happened here because it's absolutely awful. Do your own research on the events of what took place, but I highly, highly suggest that you do not watch the video of what happened. The people that were in the arena at the time and the people watching the webcast, that is something that they are probably never going to forget for the rest of their lives. And I had the misfortune of seeing the video on social media, and it's absolutely awful. So please don't go and watch the video. Instead, just research what happened. In terms of the neck guard debate, I think what happened with Johnson this past week, it's brought the conversation back to the fold, and I think it's a really important conversation to have. I will preface this by saying I've never played hockey, whether it be recreationally or professionally. I don't really have the best advice to be able to provide on whether neck guards should be mandatory. I don't think it's fair for me to sit here and say, yes, all hockey players should wear neck guards when I've never played hockey and never worn a neck guard myself. So it's purely my perspective as a viewer of the sport as opposed to a player itself. I think obviously there's been a lot of conversation, whether it be in the Elite League or whether it be the NHL, all over the hockey world since this event took place. I know the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, their minor league teams in the AHL and the ECHL, neck guards have now become mandatory for those players. The NHL are having discussions about whether making it mandatory. They're being heavily recommended at this point by a lot of teams. I've seen a couple of people on social media talking about when they switched to using a neck guard, and they said that it takes a little while to get comfortable with, and you find that you're a lot warmer on the bench than you were before. You might find it more difficult to cool down or kind of get comfortable within the first month or so, but after kind of a month or 6 weeks, it's almost as if you forget that it's there. So maybe it's a case of short-term loss for long-term gain and long-term safety as well. Obviously, what happened was a freak accident, and in 99.999% of hockey games, something like that never has the possibility of occurring, let alone actually happening. But it's the one time that it does happen and the impact of that happening that obviously sparks the conversation. I think it would be really nice to see both the NHL and other pro hockey leagues around the world being proactive in this instance instead of reactive. Obviously, the Elite League is being reactive as a result of the consequences of not being proactive. But obviously, it would be nice to see the NHL and other leagues see what happened in England, in Sheffield, and go, you know what? I think it might be best if we implement this now, have the discussion now, so then we don't have to have the discussion when one of our players passes as well. Obviously, there are leagues in Finland and I believe Sweden that already have mandatory neck guards. I think at the very least for junior players playing in the pro leagues. I think a lot of the leagues have them just mandatory league-wide. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I think the safety of players is going to be coming to the forefront again, especially because a lot of players, especially with the Penguins organization, played with Adam Johnson. So this is very fresh for them. Like, he only played in the NHL a couple of years ago, so a lot of these guys in the NHL have played with him at some point in his career, so it's hitting a little bit closer to home than, you know, some guy who never played in the NHL all the way on the other side of the world. So it would be good to have the discussion. Whether the NHL actually implements it, I'll believe it when I see it. I think a lot of teams and the league itself are highly recommending that players consider wearing neck guards just to avoid the slim possibility that something like this happens again. But as we've seen numerous times in the NHL, we've seen whether it be Clint Malachuk and his awful injury, luckily he was able to survive from that, and a lot of times where players are pushed forward or they hit a toe pick in the ice and they fling themselves forward and their feet come up and hit players in the face. We've had instances many times over recent years where players' skates have gone up towards people's faces, and luckily nothing deadly has happened as a result. So I think it would be good for players and teams to at least strongly consider and have the discussion amongst their team. If you play hockey recreationally and you're watching this video, maybe have that discussion with your friends or your teammates. Maybe look at kind of the response to what's been happening and have that thought and that discussion to yourself and others of, maybe we should try wearing neck guards too, because the last thing we want is another tragic accident to take place or another life to be lost because people didn't even have the discussion about wearing neck guards, or have the discussion at the very least. Anything else after that, it's obviously up to you. So, but the one thing I will say is it's really nice to see the outpouring of support from the NHL teams and the hockey world in general. There's a minority of people who, you know, are taking this the wrong direction, I think, and are kind of forgetting the main fact that a player, a human being, passed away as a result of this. So seeing the outpouring of support and seeing the stickers on the helmets and seeing the moments of silence and Pittsburgh doing their moment of cheering and kind of one last huge send-off for Adam Johnson, I love that stuff. So it just goes to show you that the hockey world, in the face of tragedy, they do come together and they want to support everybody, whether it be the friends and family of Johnson himself or people who have been affected by it. The hockey world, when there's a tragedy, they come together, and in my mind, they show why they're one of the best leagues, one of the best sports in the world. Neck guards, I think it's a really good question to be asking, especially in the face of what's happened. Here's hoping that a lot of players start to adopt them for their own safety and the safety of everybody else. And on that rather somber note, I think I'm going to end today's video here. That was another episode of This Week in Hockey. What do you guys think about the topics that we discussed or the questions that were asked? Also, do you have another kind of topic or question that you'd like me to cover in a future episode? Do let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I do hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew Forsid, Houston NG, Raquel, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.